1945. This is Ernest Crocker.
I have developed a secret weapon that will end this war.
This sounds familiar.
Our plan is simple.
Is it?
First, we will chemically analyze the worst smells in the world. Shit, vomit, smelly feet, goat, rotten egg, and combine them into the ultimate stink juice. We'll give this stink juice to children in occupied China who will surreptitiously spray the stench on Japanese soldiers. Then they'll be all like, what? No, I didn't shit my pants. But then everyone else will be like, bro, we can totally smell it. And then he'll be all like, oh no, everyone hates me and I'm gross. Soon, the entire Japanese army will be known as Little Farty Poopy Pantsers.
This is fucking dumb as hell.
Or maybe it's so simple, it just might
None
work.
of this is simple. This was really their plan?
Oh, yes! After all, nobody likes the smelly kid. Right, Jason?
Hey.
And we've already made it. The ultimate stink. A horrific stench known as... Who, me?
But then I had bounced around for various jobs. Like I said, I tried radio and that didn't work because all the stations were going automated. I learned to run a recording studio so I could record musicians, but then I realized I didn't want to stay up till one in the morning with a bunch of cokeheads in a studio where they're chain smoking because I don't smoke and I can't stand smoke. So I just had lots of reasons not to do stuff. So I traveled around. I did a lot of traveling. And then said, what am I going to do? And then did this play and got a really good review and said, and I started taking an acting class.
Interesting.
And I said, well, let's just try this for a while. And if it doesn't work, I'll find something else.
So it was a casual decision? Is that what you're saying?
It was a very casual decision. It was let's try this for a while. Yeah.
Interesting. Were your parents, what line of work were your parents in when you first
My
performed?
mom was a singer. She was a big band. She was a big band singer. Actually went to Juilliard for a year, and she sang opera too. But she wanted to be a housewife. You know, I'm old, dude. And she was of a generation that wanted to get married, and she did. She quit everything and settled down. My dad he had his own business selling office supplies, and he did mostly government contracts. So he charged this guy that charged $800 for a screwdriver. That was my dad. In this case, it was $300 for those whiteboards that we all do the dry erase on now. He was selling those things to government contracts way before they went into business. So
That's amazing.
He would make his own. His brother would make them.
Oh, no kidding. So he was an innovator, really. He started innovating.
Yeah, an innovator, but you can't really credit him because they came out through somebody else eventually. But he did it.
You know, Joe, you're saying that, it was a casual decision, but from what I hear, your mom was a performer.
Yeah.
Your dad was an innovative person, regardless of what it was. And I think if you put two and two together, that's Joe. That's you.
Well, maybe there's something genetic. I mean, my dad was not creative. My dad's one of his big things was ban the books. He didn't like people reading because it kept them from living life.
Oh, that's it. Oh, really?
Yes. He wanted you to go out there and do stuff, not.
Oh, that's so interesting. You said when I started directing, I liked it as what I was doing as a director, making the audience feel. For people who don't know, and that goes hand in hand with your coaching techniques, is obviously. What is it that you discovered as you were directing that had that kind of influence on the audience?
Well, it could be something really simple. Here's a dumb example. There's what's the name of the play? I saw a play on Broadway, and it was Lend Me a Tenor, and Philip Bosco, this amazing actor, was starring, and Philip Bosco had a bit where somebody gave him a piece of information that you knew he was not going to like. And just as he got the information, he put a grape in his mouth. When he put the grape in his mouth, you knew he was going to spit the grape, but you didn't know when. And he carried it for like 30 seconds to a minute, where he's sitting there and he said, you could hear him build, you could feel him build, you could feel something going on, and and listening to the way the laughter rose in anticipation of it. And just when they reached the pitch of their laughter, at the height of their laughter, he spit it. And that caused the whole audience to go absolutely nuts. This was his bit. It was a brilliant bit, whether the director gave it to him or whether he came up with it himself. Brilliant friggin' bit. And it's a way of manipulating audiences in a beautifully positive way. And that was very influential to me. Every time I directed a comedy, I would find a moment to do that, just to see to find something where a pause was laid out just long enough to get the audience to anticipate it so much that when it happened, it caused a second explosion. And
Sure.
and it literally always works. And just then there are other ways that you can do it. You can do it with emotion. You can do it with a touch. You can do it with silence. You can do so many things emotionally. And like I said, to let it get an audience to respond in a way that somehow releases them from whatever's going on in their lives or helps them deal with it is, I just think there's nothing more important than that.
Oh, wow. So you're still storytelling, even though you may not be the actor.
Yeah, exactly. It is storytelling. And it's music. It's music.
Yes.
I always tell actors that a play is music.
Mm.
You know, and another actor, I remember, he liked working with actors is fun. I'm sure you know this. I say this as an actor, but sometimes somebody has a set way they want to do things,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that set way is not going to work for the piece as a whole. So finding a way to get them to come into your vision, or I had this one actor, and he just loved. He had a big ego, and great guy, big ego, and he would always go on his own way. I'd give him a direction, or I'd give him a thing to do, and he would go on his own direction. He'd do whatever he wanted to do, and it was all very big and very lovely and very broad. Except it was all kind of became the same. And I told him, I said, "This is music, dude. You got to save your solos. You got to save the solos for the impactful places, and let the rest of it just be simple and be there and be talk to somebody, and then take your solo and go for it, dude. I won't stop you, but it's all sounding the same."
Wow. So this is interesting because one of the things you said I'm just going to use Dave Bautista as an example because you mentioned him. When you work with actors, they have their own instruments that they bring to the table. And then there is the coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the balance between the two. How do you approach an actor, any actor, when you see somebody say, "I want to, so and so said I want to train with you." How do you approach that actor? What's your approach?
I give them something dead cold to read to see what they do. That's the first thing I do. I throw something dead cold at them. And to be honest, everyone is different. And what I do with my coaching is I gear it to the actor specifically. So giving them a piece of cold reading lets me know if they're good off the page right off the bat, if they're finding the story as soon as they go in, or if they're just trying to get words out of their mouths.
Mm.
And any one of those things you can play with, but you need to know what it is.
Mm.
And then I also always have a long talk beforehand. One of the things I talk about is what other thing are you passionate about? What other thing do you do? Did you come from another career? My favorite story to tell about this is I had a lawyer who came to me and he wanted to get into voice acting, and he had taken classes for a year with some big muck in the industry, who then did a demo for him, and it was the worst demo I'd ever heard in my life. It's terrible. It sounded like the guy gave up. He said, I can't get this guy to work. I'm going to just give up on him and get a demo and get the money and run. And that's what it felt like to me. So we sat down and we had a cup of coffee, or tea in my case. And I said, and he told me he's a lawyer. I said, "You a lawyer? How long were you a lawyer?" He said, "For 30 years. I said, "In that year when you were talking with that guy, did he ever ask you about your lawyering?" He said, "No." I said, "Okay. As a lawyer, you were a criminal lawyer. You gave summations to juries, right?" So he said, "Yeah." I said, "Basically, so what you're doing is trying to get a whole bunch of people to like you, trust you, and do what you wanted them to do, which is to get your client off. You were acting that whole time. everything that you do as a lawyer applies to your did as a lawyer applies to your acting. And then I gave him a piece of copy. And I said, okay, read this now, do it as a summation. Night and day. Night and day. So I want to find what it is in the rest of people's lives that they can just apply to make it easier. Or what I call it find your easy. Find the way that makes it easy for you to do what you do. Yes, acting's hard. Yes, it's all difficult. Yes, you have to have skills, but you can find easier ways to shortcut your way to those skills if you just open yourself up to using all of you, as part of the process.
Wow. I love the insight of what you're bringing to the table as a coach. So you really have to, besides knowing your own worth as a teacher, as an artist, you really have to know how to read people properly.
Yeah. Once again, I went to school to be a psychologist. I'm always reading.
So there is the secret of, well, people are, we are, when you were speaking about some of the stuff, you're absolutely right. I think the worst thing is people don't get out of their own way.
Yeah.
They keep stopping themselves, right? Um, how do you approach when you start casting a play and you start getting cast on? Why do you pick a certain individual, and how do you mix them all up?
That can be, that is the most subjective thing on earth. It could be the smallest spark. The very first play I ever directed called for a very strong, robust woman as the lead who would like convince men. She would cure men of whatever their problems were. And so I was looking at these big, robust women, and then this tiny girl came in and auditioned, and she was so powerful that I went, "Oh, I want tiny." I went tiny, and then built the cast around her.
Oh, wow.
Who would fit with this girl who was the exact opposite of what the physical description was for the character in the play. And the first thing is to be open, to not know what you're going to do, to have some basic assumptions of what you want, but allow yourself to not to go in different directions if something comes out and hits you.
That's really interesting. So you changed the entire cast based on one person
Yep.
who did not fit the mold.
Yep.
Wow. Do you think that happens in Hollywood?
Oh God, yes. Sure it does. Absolutely. I can't think of an example right this second because I don't know the casting processes, but I'm absolutely sure it happens.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a process between, like, I was never a really great auditioner. There was times, there was a moment in my career where I started being a pretty good auditioner and understanding the techniques with the organic behavior that comes into it, right? But there are the two different things. Auditioning is one thing, as you know. I'd like you to talk about that.
Yeah.
And getting into character for a project is a whole other thing.
Yes.
So
But
can you elaborate on that?
But you can use a lot of both. I think the biggest thing that people do to sabotage themselves in this business is get too much in their heads. And there's a lot of, I'll give you an example right now for you. I'll make you do something. Okay? When you're in love, so just say, I love you.
I love you.
Tense up your gut and say, I love you.
I love you. Yeah.
You hear the difference? Yeah. Your body is your friend. Your body can shortcut you to so many things. And rather than thinking stuff in your head all the time, chart where you feel stuff in your body. And suddenly a whole bunch of your thought processes are unnecessary. And that works in auditions and it works in performance. I mean, if you come from theater, you're always using your body. And people use their bodies and they're expressive and they do all that, but they don't necessarily do that. Remember motion in their bodies and chart that. Because if you're having trouble getting to something, getting to an emotion or getting to a place you need to be, that's one trick you can use. I mean, it's not always this.
How do you coach actors to get over the fear of being judged when they're walking into an audition room?
Tough one. I mean, one of the cliches that I think is true is they want you to be good when you go in the room. They want you to solve their problem. They want you. They're not there. They're not judging you. They're hoping you'll do what they need so that they don't have to audition anymore, because auditioning's a pain in the ass. I think that, and the other thing is, we're always going to be nervous. We're selling ourselves in what we do as actors, and of course we're going to be nervous because we are personally invested in ourselves. Even if we don't like ourselves, we're personally invested in ourselves. So of course there's going to be nerves. So I would not worry so much about being nervous, because some of that's going to be there. I mean, you talk about, everybody talks about getting into the roles and being utterly immersed and all that stuff. There's always going to, Meissner says that acting is behaving really in imaginary circumstances. So it's always going to be imaginary circumstances. So there's always going to be a part of you that's going to be over there going, what am I doing? But the more you can minimize that guy, the better off you are, but it's not going to completely go away. So there's always going to be some nerves. So assume that the nerves are going to be there and don't worry about them so much, because just assume they're going to be there. That makes sense?
Yeah. No, it's very challenging to do what you're saying.
Yeah, it's not easy.
It's not easy to do.
But once again, your body helps you there again.
Yeah.
If you're not in your head, but you're in your body, if you know your stuff and you're prepared, you got your lines down, you're cool. Although even if you don't, I once did an audition where I was in the middle of the room and I had my script under it, and I was doing this thing, and suddenly the script went flying across the room. It just flew out of my hands, and I had to keep going. I got called back. I did not book it, but I got called back.
But that's a skill set right there.
Yeah, it's. I think Dave said something once in an interview about getting permission to be loose enough in the room to be able to adapt.
Well, yeah, I mean, my experience with Dave Bautista has been, I met him on the set, and I was very prepared for the role that I played. I knew my character inside out. I was like, okay, let's turn it on, and I was on. And we read with the director, and Dave was very cool, very kind, very calm, and we became friends. And because our characters in the film were going to be friends, and we looked like we could be friends, so it made complete sense. And we did the first scene on the first day. I had it in my head, and then organically quite a bit. So Jeffrey Dean Morgan had just gotten this rewrite, and he was like, really, he was on page, but he was also off page, and he was very nervous, and he was like, "Oh, I'm so fucking nervous, man. I'm trying to." And I said, my whole thing was, man, I've been waiting for this for 7 years. I don't have time to be nervous.
Good attitude.
And